Today we'll be looking at a cue that I've written for the opening scene of a new movie called The Hitch. Now this is a unique opportunity because we're going to get to see that opening scene with dialogue and sound effects, and then we'll look at how I approached writing the music and then get to hear the music against the picture. So let's roll that new intro we did from last time and jump right in. All right, let's look at this scene as you might get it as a composer for the first time. Now, this picture is quite far along. The edit is locked, which means the timings aren't going to change. The sound is pretty much finalized except for the final mix. A lot of times I'll get picture early in the edit where scenes are missing, there are slugs for special effects. So this is an idealized version of what you might get. Let's look at that picture and then we'll come back and see how we would do what's called a spotting session for this.
Out here, please. Let me in.
Well, that's certainly an intriguing scene. Let's talk about how a spotting session might go for this movie and for this scene. Now, a spotting session is where you sit down, typically with the director, and you talk about where music will go in the movie. That's kind of the first step. And also the ideas behind the movie. What type of music is going to go where? What important moments you're going to accentuate. Now, they may have temp tracked this movie, which means that they've used music from other films to just have as a temporary musical score there. That is somewhat of a two-edged sword. You know, in some ways it's good because you get to see what they're thinking. You know, you get to actually hear the music that they're thinking of for these scenes. But it also can be a negative because they may have gotten so attached to that music that they can't hear the scenes any other way. They may have even temp tracked it with music you've done from another movie. But the important thing in these spotting sessions with the director is really to sit and listen. You need to hear their ideas. This is their baby. They've been working on this for maybe years. And now you're coming in at the end. And you're trying to take their vision and bring it to life. You also need to bring your own ideas. That is why you're there. They've hired you hopefully because they believe in the music that you can compose. So you're also bringing ideas. It's a conversation. Let's go ahead and spot this scene together as we might if we were sitting with a director. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it right here on this opening frame. And I want us to just look around the frame because I think it really gives us a very good clue as to the feeling of this movie. Now, I should tell you that I am one of the filmmakers on this film. I'm actually the director of this film. I made it with a very good friend of mine named Stephen Dempsey, an incredible filmmaker, and he's the cinematographer on this film. Now, from the very beginning, he talked about how he wanted to start with a very wide shot of roads that just seemed to stretch into the distance without any destination that you could see. This is a very transitional space. It has a feeling of liminality. It's a space between. We've got these very great clouds up above. We don't see any other sign of life or wildlife or cars. We've got some odd objects in the left of the frame just sitting there that we can't really tell what they are. This tree seems somewhat out of place. The telephone poles and their shape have something to do with the rest of the movie as we proceed. So just looking at this frame was a great inspiration to me as far as what the sound of this scene and the movie would be. I'm going to go ahead and continue on. I want you to listen to the sound design. We only hear some ambience, but no sign of wildlife, no birds. If you were to watch this on a big screen right now, you might pick out a few birds in the sky, but those will all be removed for the final movie. And you hear no cars. I mean, really, where can you go nowadays that you don't hear cars? So all this sound design adds to this feeling of emptiness and foreboding. The only thing to break this silence is the clicking of her heels. Okay, I'm going to stop here again. As she enters the frame, we come to understand what that clicking sound was. It's the sound of her heels walking on the pavement. So that sound is very important. In the score, we can't cover that in any way. So there'll be no percussion or any other kind of sound that could interfere with that. We have to be very careful to let that sound come through. You'll also notice that she's very small in the frame, and this adds to the feeling that she's wandered into a situation that's bigger than she is. The landscape is literally swallowing her up. The next thing that we hear is the approaching vehicle, and it really takes over all of the space of the sound. It's a heightened sound, so we'll have to address that in the writing of the score. All right, let's continue on.
Oh, thanks so much. Sir? Did you unlock the door? Sir, can you let me in? It's freezing out here, please.
As we cut to this medium shot of her at the window of the truck asking to get in, we really start to have empathy for this character. We can see in her face that she's found herself in a situation that she's totally unprepared for by the way she's dressed and by her insistence of trying to get into a vehicle with a driver who's not responding to her in any normal sort of way. So again, the feeling of danger is ramping up. Now, I think it would be a mistake to write this from her perspective, to write a theme for this character. What we're really scoring here is the situation, the feeling of danger and foreboding in this empty liminal space. All right, let's continue on.
Let me in?
I think we're all internally screaming at her not to get in the truck. And you can see that she backs away from the window. Again, she gets no response from the driver. And that wiper blade just goes in between that, breaking the silence. And then you hear the click of the door handle. She grabs the door, but she pauses. It's really quite a wonderful performance. There's a little pause where you think, okay, maybe she's going to make the decision that we want her to make. But she gets in the truck, and then the sound of the door closing. So all of those moments, all of those sounds are very important. We don't want to step on them, and we want to honor her performance, the way that she backs up and time seems to slow for a moment as she's making a decision. Even with her back turned to us, we can see that decision, that very slight pause too before she gets in the truck. All of those things we want to give space to in the way that we write the music here. All right, let's watch now through to the end of this opening scene. Here at the end, we get the title of the piece, and it comes in this very 70s exploitation type of font in a shock of red. The only shock of red we've had until this point has been the taillights of the truck. Everything else in this frame has always been with muted colors, a lot of blue in the shadows. But now the taillights and this title are tied together because of that red, and that red represents danger. A title like this that comes on so boldly and calls attention to itself, I would usually hit that with everything I had in the orchestra to kind of bring even more attention to it. It's calling for that. But here I'm going to approach it slightly differently. I'm still going to hit it, but in more of a sound design way. So now that we have an idea of what the conversation would be between the director and the composer, we've got a lot of material now to choose the sounds for this piece and the approach to it. Let's take a look at what I've picked for my instrumentation. You'll notice that this score looks very different from some of the other scores that we've done on this channel. A lot of the pieces that we've looked at have been big cinematic scores with a full orchestra. Here we have a very different instrumentation. We have 2 synthesizers and a cello section, and this cello section consists of 6 players. The reasoning behind the choices of this instrumentation comes from the discussions that we had about the liminality of this space. The synthesizers are artificial. They represent organic sounds, but they aren't organic sounds. Here we have synth 2 creating this low hum, this low G pedal throughout almost the whole piece until we see Vicky at the window in that medium shot. There's going to be a change of the sound there, but because of how these sounds evolve slowly over time, it's not going to be a drastic change. It'll be a very soft hit. Everything throughout this piece is very soft in the way that it hits any moment. You can see that we have rubato as the tempo marking, which means that if I were to conduct this with real players, I would need to have punches and streamers. And streamers are these lines that go across the screen that tell me where a hit point is. Now, I'm not hitting them very hard. Like Vicky at the window, for instance, I would see a streamer possibly starting on this 2/4 bar. I might put a hold here, and as I'm holding the orchestra, I see the streamer come across, and then when it gets to the edge of the screen, I would give the downbeat for measure 12. The only hard hit here is on this title. So I'll have to nail that exactly, but everything else is soft throughout. The cellos are going to provide that melodic material through here, the foreboding. It's the only real sense of melody. All right, let's listen to some of these synth sounds, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why I chose these specific sounds. The sound that I chose for Synth 2 and this low drone comes from a synthesizer called Omnisphere made by Spectrasonics. The name of the patch is Backwards Magnetic Fields. Let's just have a listen to that sound. For me, this backwards magnetic field sound really represents the low hum of this liminal space. It's emanating from the space itself. The G is what we're hearing as the fundamental, but there's also a very prominent E flat that I'm hearing in this. It almost sounds as if it's a very high overtone that's being accentuated, which again would be somewhat unusual, even though it's probably just part of this sound. So I've really embraced that E flat in the rest of the piece, and I'm starting my cellos on an E flat. I've got this E flat and the other synth sound. So I'm really taking this sound and making it the basis for everything else. Now, I could have started from scratch and programmed my own synthesizer sound. That's a very valid way to go. But I thought that I would start by auditioning sounds from this instrument, and the backwards magnetic fields really spoke to me. You can also attach controllers to all of these different parameters and really change and model the sound in real time as you play it. Let's listen to a few of the other sounds that we have here. And there aren't many sounds. You'll notice that. That's by design. It's partly because I'm showing restraint in this very sparse liminal world. But I also find that if you stack too many of these kind of sounds on top of each other, they lose their personality. It just becomes a wall of sound, more like an organ playing than this sound of these unique instruments. Let's look at another synth sound. Again, this one is from the Omnisphere synth. It's called Lonely Metals Evolution. And here it is as the main sound of synth 1. Let's hear what that E flat sounds like. Very interesting how it slightly breaks up over time. It's got a little bit of a vocal quality to it. And again, you can control all of its parameters by attaching MIDI controllers. Another sound to listen for is this Icarus sound, and it's modulated here to speed up and slow down. Let's just listen to that sound. And this final sound, this hit, will be triggered with a single key. This will be a combination of sounds to build the hit for our title. Let's listen to the music on its own before we see it with picture. The only difference between the score and what you'll be hearing is that the cellos are actually playing consordino. They're playing with mutes, and I haven't marked that in the score yet. All right, let's take a listen to this, and then we'll come back and watch it with picture. I think that this piece really captures the feeling I'm after in this scene. The synthesizers, yes, they're complex sounds that evolve over time, but they combine in a way that doesn't call too much attention to themselves. They seem to sit and almost feel like a hum that's emanating from the space. By muting the cellos, we've dampened them down, much like the dampening of the color palette. We look at the muted colors of our scene, and I think the cellos really fit into that. I hope that these talks about conceptual ideas are helpful for you. Conceptual thinking is a really important part of composing, especially for media. I know we talk a lot about music theory and technical things as far as orchestration goes, but if you can combine this type of thinking with all of your musical knowledge, well, it just opens up a whole bunch of possibilities. All right, let's listen to the whole scene, and I'll see you all next time.